In 1921, he went out to Maine to his cabin he had on an island off there, went for a swim, came in, didn't feel well, told Eleanor he's going upstairs and go to bed. He went upstairs, went to bed, and he never got out of bed by himself again. He was paralyzed to his neck. He got the rest of his shoulders down. They brought in all the doctors, everybody, and finally he was diagnosed with polio.
So now, please welcome the official, non-official, non-sponsor of the Savannah Bananas, but a big fan. Please welcome John Fletcher.
Here we are again with American History 250 with my favorite high school teacher, Dean Cozine. In our first edition, you shared about the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire of 1911, which was amazing in its impact on American history and the worker safety. Now you're going to tell us about the fake walk that led a handicapped man to the presidency. So tell us about that walk style and how that impacted American history.
Well, first of all, you need to understand that Roosevelt ran for vice president with James Cox in 1920, and he was a star of the Democratic Party. In 1921, he went out to Maine to his cabin he had on an island off there, went for a swim, came in, didn't feel well, told Eleanor he's going upstairs and go to bed. He went upstairs, went to bed, and he never got out of bed by himself again. He was paralyzed to his neck. He got the rest of his shoulders down. They brought in all the doctors, everybody, and finally he was diagnosed with polio. For all of his life, he believed he could recover. And so in 1920, he ended up going to Warm Springs, Florida, buying that place and being in a swimming pool and he thought if he swam, he would get those legs back. And then he went out to the Caribbean and fished and tried. But he could not get back his legs. He couldn't. And Eleanor finally told him in 1925 he was going to be nothing, or he had to get back into politics. But he couldn't get back into politics unless he could learn to walk. So what happened was they put these big iron braces on his legs. So his legs were no muscles, nothing at all. Hip down, he had no muscles at all. And he learned then to do two things. And there's only 22 seconds in all the films that were taken of Roosevelt that shows this walk. And basically he had a son or a Secret Service agent or somebody else on his right-hand side, and he would put his arm on the right-hand side of this guy and holding there. On his other hand, he had a cane, and then they would walk, and he would swing his legs. And if you didn't watch, you couldn't see. And he wore long pants, so you couldn't see. You had to be right up close to see that he had braces on his legs. And he learned to do that. And in, I believe it was in Houston, 1928, he did that walk for the first time. And he had his son with him and his cane. And he walked across the stage, and everybody held their breath there who knew what was going on, because if he didn't make it across, if he fell down or up, there was no career. He survived. And he did. What you know about Roosevelt, he is never seen in public when he is running for Congress in a wheelchair or anybody helping him. If you look at all the photos of Roosevelt, he's standing. When he's giving a speech, he's holding on to the podium. He'll walk a few paces across to get to where he's going. And if you didn't know him, you went into his office. He's not sitting in a wheelchair. He's sitting in a chair behind a desk, and you can't see. And he never gets up. You've seen interviews with him, with the police, and all that. All the time that he was president, he's never pictured. There's no picture of him in a wheelchair. The only time that you see Roosevelt in a wheelchair is in February of 1945 after Yalta, just before he dies. He had met with Stalin and Churchill, and he comes back to Congress, and he gives a speech to Congress, and he's sitting in a wheelchair. He apologized to them. He said, been hard and all that kind of stuff. And so that all the movies you see, I mean, you see Roosevelt running around in his house and all the people he knows with the wheelchair and all that stuff. That's not true. They rarely let anybody see him in a wheelchair, and rarely let anybody ever take a picture of him in a wheelchair.
So as you look at that, I mean, literally, uh, a picture is power, and because his persona, he had to show that he was a powerful person, and so was did word get out very much, or
Here's where you want to just look at it. Go through and look at all the political cartoons of the 1930s. And if you look at all the political cartoons of the 1930s, you'll see that the media portrayed him as some healthy guy doing this or that, or didn't like him, still a guy who was didn't look like nothing ever as an invalid. And the press probably knew it, but he got the press on his side by being the first president to hold these press conferences. And he'd call all these guys in, and he'd let them ask him questions, and he'd answer the questions, and he had a great personality. And they made their money by being reporters who report stories. And he cultivated them by giving them stories and giving them headlines. And he held these press conferences just before the deadline so they could meet their deadlines and get their bylines. So he manipulated the press like no president ever before. Of course, he had his fireside chats. He had a great voice and so on and all of that. No other president who's tried to fireside chat has had the luck that Roosevelt had, not Jimmy Carter, not anybody. And Roosevelt had his warts, but he had his strength was his personality, and his political philosophy was, whether you wanted the New Deal, was basically, if people are in need and government can do something about it to make their lives better, then government should. That was basically what Eleanor said that he believed. So anyway, that's and of course the history of since Roosevelt has been the history of the two sides yelling about what he did.
if you were to say the three greatest achievements that he had in his presidency, what would they be? Because we go back to these and realize, if not for his ability to do this manipulated walk, these things might not have happened. What would those three things have been?
I would think that his initial speech, Nothing to Fear Itself, where he convinced the American people there was still hope. And they turned around from despair. And then in terms of particular things, the Social Security Act is probably one of the most important pieces of legislation that he got through that has been most long-lasting. And whether you like it or not, it's made a great impact on America. And I would think, the other thing, that his leadership during World War II, his commitment, his attempt to commit that when the war was over, we were not going to continue with the what history had been, that the war that ended had seeds in it for the next war. And so that was, and he learned from Wilson's failure that basically we need to create a system, and he created the United Nations. And whether you like it or not, what it is today, the United Nations came out, and it laid a foundation for where countries could at least talk before they went to war. And I think that establishing the notion that their wars were not something we should expect to have on a normal basis, but they are the abnormal. I think those are his great achievements.
Also, if you look at it, in the 1930s, you had the Communications Act of 1934, and then you also had the establishment of the Farm Credit System, which provided lending to agriculture.
You asked me for three. You want me to give you a list? I can give you a list.
That's it. But so tell us about those, about how important those were in American history, because what we look at is, here we are with our nation's 250th birthday right here on the horizon. And there's so many pivotal moments in our history that we don't get where we are here today without smart decisions having been made along the way.
Well, let me just tell you the Social Security Act, basically, before that, if you were a worker, a regular worker, you worked until you died, or you got hurt and then you went off and you were in poverty. Uh, what the working class didn't have homes and lived in very bad off. And then the Social Security Act of 1935, which Francis Perkins, by the way, wrote most of it, it laid the foundation that the government cares about you and wants to make sure that that there's when you can't work anymore, you're a certain age, you're going to have some income, and that was one important, great, lasting pieces for legislation. Another one, which I haven't mentioned, which is the Fair Labor Standards Act, which was written by Francis Perkins also, and that established where children under 16 years old were barred from working in dangerous places. It's established one of the great debates that's going on to this day, the minimum wage, and the first minimum wage there. And it established some other things, overtime, which is a big debate, right? Time and a half overtime if you make wages. And so there are a whole bunch of stuff that Roosevelt got through in the New Deal that are with us today, and we're still fighting over what it should be or that be, but they're all based on the same principle. It says, well, how much can we afford to make life help people? And that's the debate that goes on.
Well, because as you look at Social Security, the retirement age, not a whole lot of people were living to 65
That's
back at
true.
that time. And so, therefore, as we look at it now and say, gee, we turned 65 or 70 and we're on Social Security and could be living another 10 or 20 years. And when it was first set up, it wasn't intended to be able to fund that much of a longevity, was it?
That's true. And of course, it was very minimal in the beginning. But boy, after World War II, the the longevity of Americans started, the medicine came in. You know, I'm only alive today because of something that happened in 1938, and that's the discovery of penicillin. When I was 1946, I got cut up of my eye by a kid. The doctor sewed it up, got infection, and if they hadn't had penicillin, I would have died. And I had a shot every 6 hours for a year, for a month, not a month, a week, to cure that. But anyway, the nature of the Social Security Act and the people longevity after 1945 is dramatically increased. Another law. Here's something for you: the FHA, the Federal Home Act. Before the 1930s, only 10% of the people owned homes. By 1970, 66% owned homes. And that just tells you what a dramatic increase in the middle class was a result of lots of things. And a lot of that was based on private, not just government. But that was America saying people ought to have houses, have to put a roof over their heads, and own it. And if you own something, you take better care of it than if you don't own it. And you feel more part of a community than if you don't own it.
Well, we've been talking today with Dean Cozine, the greatest history teacher of all time. And I'm the only person that gets that vote. But if I asked Mac Churchill to vote, he would vote with me as well. So thank you so much for telling us about the fake walk that helped to solidify FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as president of the United States, and all the things that happened through his presidency and beyond were impacted by his ability to show himself to be robust and active. And Dean, we look forward to having you again as we talk about America's 250th birthday.
Okay. I look forward to being on again.